Yeah, thank you. The mic's on, okay. If you would be so kind to take a seat. I see everybody's found all the nice goodies in the back. Nina Nelson there. Say hello, Nina.
Hello, Madam President.
Is Yes, Val.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. And so Nina does the decorations and puts us in the spirit of whatever it is. And then our members bring goodies, and tonight it's Central Half Moon Bay, so Central Half Moon Bay. North Half Moon Bay. I was misinformed. So sorry. Okay, North. Well, some of you don't know where you are. You won't raise your hand. Okay.
If you would, Paul, bring us some sweet.
Well, I am Barbara Von Blon, president of AAUW, and I want to thank you for coming tonight. I know through the smoke, and it's almost a full moon, so if you're feeling a little strange. And then, of course, we have Thanksgiving coming up, so really appreciate you being here. To be respectful of those guests we have, we're going to have our business meeting at the end of our meeting tonight to allow guests to leave. So please, if you're members, stay for very important messages, okay? And I promise it will be short, 10 minutes tops.
Oh, that's a great meeting.
That's not a meeting, a business meeting. And again, AAUW, for those of you that don't know, probably not too many of this group, but again, we were founded in 1881, long time ago, and our branch is over 51 years old here in town. So we've been doing a lot of mission for women and girls for a very long time. And of course, that will be reflective in this program also. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Joyce Carroll. Carol, I always do that, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Welcome everyone, and I too thank you for coming out tonight. I'm Carol Joyce. I am Vice President of the AAUW Fund, and I am thankful for a few moments to talk to you before the panel from women who identify, recruit, and elect, also known as WIRE for Women, begin their discussion. What I want to talk to you about tonight is how their discussion on women in leadership fits within AAUW's mission. Leadership is an important piece of AAUW's mission, and with our donation to the AAUW Fund, we support the research and other activities that AAUW does to promote women in leadership. In December's tidings, you can read about other activities that AAUW does through AAUW funds, but tonight I want to focus on women in leadership and some research that AAUW put out in 2016. In 2016, AAUW put out Barriers and Bias. Let me get the name right here. Barriers and Bias, the Status of Women in Leadership. This research confirmed what we all know, and that there is a gender leadership gap. And that leadership gap exists in universities, government, businesses, courts, unions, and religious institutions. The findings of AAUW, as well as their solutions, are available to you in two different ways in the back of the room. One is a one-page handout that's a summary of the research, and then I have 4 or 5 copies of the actual research for those who are interested. But just so you know, a key reason for the disparity the research found isn't just blatant sex discrimination, which you may have felt or know women who have experienced, but it's also unconscious or implicit bias. And they define that in the one-page report. I won't go into it, but I want to highlight that one of the solutions you can be part of is they have developed a test for each of us to find out if we have implicit bias when it comes to women in leadership. And that link will be in the tidings and is in the one-page summary in the back. Now, there is some good news after this election. And I think it's an excellent segue into what Wire will be talking about. In 2016, when the report came out, U.S. Congress was 19% women. These statistics come from the Center for American Women in Politics. AAUW relied on them, and that's where I got my numbers. Just a note that these are preliminary still because there are a few races that haven't been finalized yet. But they expect that the U.S. Congress to go from 19% women to 23% women, which I think is a big gain. They did state legislatures, but that updated information isn't available at this time. But when it came to U.S. governors in 2016, there were 6 women governors, and now there are 9 women governors. So that's another big for women. But we still have a long ways to go, and that's what Wire is here to talk about. And so I'd like to introduce a familiar face to you, our member, Aline Zanger, who is the current president of Wire.
Thank you, Carol and Nancy and Jan. I am going to leave the major part of the speaking to Carol Marshall and Storm Russell. And let me just tell you a little bit about them. Carol is the founder of Wire. She founded the organization about a year and a half ago. And she was the first president until the spring when I became president. Carol is no stranger to politics. She first became involved when she was 12 years old, when she did volunteer work for Senator Robert Taft of Ohio. And then she went on, after graduating from college, to become one of the first, maybe the first legislative assistant that was a woman to U.S. senators and members of Congress. At that time, and Carol can talk to you about it afterwards, it was considered a man's job, that a woman couldn't possibly do this. And at that time, she didn't have a law degree. So a woman and a non-lawyer doing that job in Congress, that was kind of unheard of. But she quickly developed an incredible reputation, which led to many things, including her being appointed by 2 different presidents to positions. One of them was the head of the San Francisco Mint, and probably more importantly, from my perspective, she was the first head of VISTA, which is a domestic Peace Corps, a program that worked with low-income poverty communities throughout the United States, and did incredible work there as a presidential appointee. She received her Juris Doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, and has been involved and ran for California State Senate in San Francisco a few years ago. I met her shortly after that. And one of the interesting volunteer activities she's doing today, she serves on the board of the Margulis Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University, and that center is dealing with some very important cutting-edge ethics issues in the professions. She's got an incredible background and an incredible passion for Wire. To my left, Storm Russell is one of Wire's volunteers. He volunteered for several candidates running for city council or school boards in this last election, and he will share his perspective about what all of you and others can do to really make a difference in a woman's candidacy for a local nonpartisan election. So I'm going to turn this over now to Carol, and she'll tell you about our organization.
Thank you. Thank you. I always have to say when people give a nice introductions like Eileen and they get longer and longer because I get older and older. So I always say, please don't say everything I did. It takes much too much time. You guys are really lucky to have Eileen as a member. I've known her for some years. I respect her and admire her, and Wire could have no better president, let me tell you, than Eileen Zanger. I also have known Storm for a long time. We hadn't seen each other, for about 30 years? We were involved in politics a long time ago, 20, okay. That's not good. Any rate, when you get older, that's what happens. Before I start, I want to first thank you for inviting me. And by the way, Nancy, I didn't realize that you had 2 program chairs, so I only brought one of these, but you and Jan will have to go out together and drink coffee and share the same cup. It's a Wire for Women cup. But thank you for asking us to come before you. And before I start talking about Wire, I just want to say that what I'd like to do is have this not be a speech and then with questions, but be a discussion. Because it is true, I'm here because I want to tell you about Wire. We want the whole community to know about it, otherwise we won't be successful. But we also want to hear, we are new, as Eileen said, and we want to hear what you think. So if you have questions or comments or suggestions or anything, feel free to interrupt me. Don't worry about that. It will make it for a more productive and interesting evening, I think. So the mission of Wire is very simple. We have organized ourselves in order to elect and appoint more women in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. We only work in the 2 counties. And of course, this year we've been busy with the election part, but we also work very hard to get women appointed to city and county positions. So remember that, keep that in mind. That's often a starting place for an elective career, or for many women who are active in the community and don't want to run for office, but want interesting and important jobs within their community. I always like to say also, right at the beginning, when I say we want to elect more women, we don't, at Wire, we don't say that there should be 50-50, we don't say there should be 80% women, 20 men. All we say is more. As Carol said in her comments about the percentages, and we are very happy about that 23%, across the country, for all elected offices, only 21% until this past election have been women. So that gender inequity is really bad, I think. And if you remember the year of the women, woman was 92 or 4, I forgot. And we thought that was our breakthrough, but what's happened actually is that the number of women serving in elective office has gone down in that time, not until this particular election. So we're not bra burners, we're not trying to take over the world, but we do believe that more women should be sitting at the seat in public office, whether it's national or local. And why do we believe that? We don't believe it because we think women are better than men. Although, if there's only one man and, that's debatable. We'll just leave it at that, okay? But seriously, and I think you all pretty much know this, but women tend to be less partisans than men. They are consensus builders. You need only to look at the Senate, U.S. Senate, where, as you probably know, the women from both the Republican and Democratic Party get together once a month for pizza. They know each other, they work together, and they have been very effective in breaking gridlocks between the 2 parties where they've gotten together and found a compromise and then sold it to the men. That is a trait that is more common in women than men. Women are more inclusive. They prefer to try to get everyone involved and have everybody happy at the end of the day. And that's very good when you're working on compromises. I worked on Capitol Hill for 7 years, both in the House and the Senate, and that used to be the case where the 2 parties worked together, but we don't see that much now. Women are also problem solvers. The reason they want to give their time is that they want to get something done. They don't want it just for their resume or to have something to do on Thursday night or get out of the house or whatever. They really want to get something done, and they want to do it as quickly as possible. And that we need more of that. I think you'd all agree with that. And then also, lastly, women are more interested in some of the social issues, housing, family kinds of issues, daycare, family leave, things of that nature. And it's not that the men don't support that, but it's not an issue that many men will put at the top of their legislative priority. So for all those reasons, and probably many more, we think more women should be elected. As Aline said, I started this actually in 2016 with a group of women who met at my house before the presidential election. And we talked about gender inequity. And I said, well, after the election, we're going to have to do something about it. We can't just say this is terrible and then walk away. And then, of course, the election didn't turn out the way some people wanted it to. And I went through this period where everybody was shocked and they were all crying, and I'd go to meetings and I'd say, well, but what are we going to do? Oh, this is terrible, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then about in January or February, women started marching. Well, that was nice to see. My granddaughter certainly got involved in all that, but I kept saying, okay, but what are we going to do? And by March, I found that the women, many women, were saying, okay, what are we going to do? And that's when we really got WIRE organized. And with Eileen's help, her legal help, among other things, we incorporated. We have a board of directors now with 8 people. We are totally nonpartisan. Let me tell you about our business model. First of all, we are nonpartisan. We have both Republicans and Democrats on the board. And the candidates that we help are not for nonpartisan offices. So we're talking mainly about school boards, city councils, special districts, community college districts, things of that nature. This is the starting point for many women. And there were, by the way, over 200 women who ran in this last election from the 2 counties. I don't have a specific number, but the great majority of them were running for the first time. So we're nonpartisan. We don't endorse candidates, and we don't give them money. Now, WIRE is unique. There's no other organization in the country that has the model that we have. And the reason I know that is when we went to the lawyers to try to incorporate, they had a terrible time with us because the IRS had never seen anyone like us, and they weren't quite sure how we should incorporate. But we are different in that, first of all, we have no litmus. We're nonpartisan, as I already said. We have no litmus test. We don't care if you're pro-life, pro-choice, pro-gun, anti-gun, whatever. And we don't endorse candidates, and we don't raise money to give to candidates. And I'll tell you in a minute what we do. But I find that this concept is a little hard to get across. So the easiest way for me to try to explain it to you is to tell you what we are not. Now, many of you may know of Emerge. It's a very fine national program to educate progressive women, i.e. Democratic women, to run for office. We don't do training. They do training, and there's Republican groups that do training as well. We don't do training. It's not the Emily's List. You all know the Emily's List. It's the largest PAC in the country. And their model, and many other groups have the same model, where they endorse certain people based upon their litmus test. For them, it's women, pro-choice women. And then they raise money a lot of money, from all over the country, and they help finance the campaigns. We don't do that. We don't endorse. We mentor women. We help them run a better campaign, but we don't endorse them for office. And we don't, as I said, we don't raise money, so I'm not here to try to get money from you. Makes my job easier. So what do we do? We recruit, as I said, women for running for office and also for appointments. So how do we do it? The best way, I think, to explain it to you is that we're like a matchmaker. We recruit candidates or find candidates who've already decided to run, and we have a whole host of volunteers. We have a database with all of our volunteers and their various skills. Do they know fundraising? Do they know social media? Do they know how to build a website? Are they good at public speaking? Whatever we live in an area that has incredible women with great skills. And so we keep track of all that. And then when a candidate says to us, I need help with fundraising, or I need help with social media, or one judge candidate came and said, I think I've got everything together, but I don't know how to put together a website. So then we go to our database and we find our members who are volunteers who have those skills, and they work one-on-one. So it's like giving free political consulting. And believe me, when you are, even if you are an incumbent, but when you're running at the level of city council or school board, you don't have a very big budget, and you really shouldn't. But they need help, and they don't have the money to hire, big campaign managers and pay them a lot of money like congressional and senatorial candidates do. So they appreciate that. And our goal, and I'm repeating, but I want to make this clear, our goal is not to endorse a candidate to try to get them elected. Our goal is to take each woman, if you're running and you're running, and maybe you're running for the same spot. Like in Redwood City, I think we had 3 women running, and we were for city council, and we were working for helping all of them, mentoring all of them. We want you to run the very best campaign you can, the most professional and the most, I can't think of a better word, but the best one that you can run. That's our job. Our job is not to elect you. Our job is not to endorse you. Our job is to help you run the best campaign you can. And since we had so many new women running this year, who had never run before, but were called into action because of the political climate, we had many people who really had no idea how to run. They just decided, and I can tell you a story in a minute, about one of them, to run, and they needed help. So that's what WIRE's all about. We hope that we will increase as we go along and as we get out into the community and you all hear more about WIRE and know that we exist, that when you see a friend, or maybe you, who would be great on a city commission and you want to try to recruit her for that position, you can say to her, well, we know of this organization called WIRE and they can help you. We have other women that have gotten appointments and they've written, a how-to, and they'll call the woman and, stand beside her and tell her how best to go about it, et cetera, et cetera. It's women helping women. And from my point of view, if nothing else, it's about time that women helped women more than they have in the past. So I'm very proud of WIRE for that. So, I haven't heard any interruptions yet, but either I'm not making it clear.
Here's one.
Oh, good.
So if you're nonpartisan, then anybody that you're helping can't mention in their campaign materials that they're supported by WIRE? I mean,
No, because we don't endorse them. Not because it's nonpartisan, but because we don't endorse. Yes. And we talk at the board a lot about how to make sure that that doesn't happen, because it's very easy for someone to say that, and it would be misconstrued.
Carol, I'd like to just add something.
Yeah.
So, yes, thank you.
Our members are volunteers for the candidates. What we do is that when this match occurs, we find that, say for example, a woman needs help with social media, and we have one or more of our members that have social media experience. We send them the members the candidate profile, and then they decide whether or not they want to spend their time working with the candidate. They may not, for a simple reason that they've got too many other things going on at the time. Or it could be that they have their personal litmus test. I mean, for example, if a candidate is running for school board and the member who has the expertise they need has a litmus test about being either pro-charter schools or against charter schools, they may decide not to work with that candidate. I mean, we have some members who will only work for Democrats. We probably have some members who will only work for Republicans. But our members, our volunteers, come from a broad swath of the demographics of each county, and they're men and women. And so they decide. So what we're kind of like a dating matchmaker in the sense that, here's the candidates and here's our members, volunteers with the expertise, and they decide whether they want to go on a date together. And we've been fortunate, we've been able to find qualified volunteers for every candidate that's asked. And in the future, when we become better known, we're going to need to have even a larger number of people who volunteer their services in STORM. We'll talk a little bit about that. And let me just mention, just because I have the floor for a minute, I wanted to mention about STORM's background. He has 30 years of being involved in campaigns and in party politics. He is a graduate of very prestigious Coro Institute, which is, the whole mission is to develop leaders in the public service arena. And he was a participant in that leadership group. He has also taught civics at the high school level for 10 years. So he has, and he has a master's in political science, and he completed doctoral studies in political science. And he knows a heck of a lot more than I do about the founding of the United States and politics, not only here, but all over the world, because he's a real intellectual, as well as a practical guy. So anyway, when he talks, you'll know a little bit about his background. But let me turn it back to Carol, and we'll hear from Storm later.
It's hard, we had dinner just now, and it's hard to get into an argument with Storm because he is an intellectual and he has more information than I have. So we're very proud and very pleased that you have helped us with the candidates. So lastly, why am I here? Well, part of it is, as I said earlier, WIRE needs to raise the level of knowledge throughout the community that we exist. Because our board is 8 people. We cannot, and we of course have our members, but we cannot recruit everybody ourselves. That's just impossible. So we need to have more people know about us, so you will have your ear and your eyes open when you meet people who you just think, boy, she'd be great on this committee, or she should be on the school board. Let's, next year see what that's all about. We really need your help. We will not succeed unless the broader community understands who we are. We also are looking for volunteers. So if you are interested in being a volunteer, we've got a sign-up sheet here by category, and you can express what area you might like to work on. So feel free afterwards to come up and sign that. And if you think about it later, I know I get all my thoughts while I'm in the shower. If all of a sudden you're in the shower and say, gee, I really should have done that. Well, call us, or, Arlene, I have cards, but you can tell her, because we do want more members. We also are trying to recruit members. Now, what does it mean to be a member of WIRE? It simply means that you put your name on the sign-up sheet that's going around and give us there it is, and there's some more around. So please do sign it up. Sign your name and your email address and your county. When you are a member of WIRE, what it means is that your name goes on our database, you get our website, you get our bi-monthly newsletter, which is really quite good. By the way, the website is on the brochure that I handed out. Check it out, because there's a lot about women in politics in there that I think you will find of interest. And also, the reason we need your county is that when we get information every month from the counties and from the various cities. There's about 40 cities in the 2 counties when they have openings on their boards or commissions. So when we find that something's going on in Menlo Park or Half Moon Bay or whatever, we then send an email to all the people in that area so that you know that this vacancy exists. You may be interested in it, or your neighbor may be interested in it, but you, by being a WIRE member, can spread the word about that vacancy. Because generally speaking, people have no idea when there are opportunities at the appointment level. So I do hope that you will sign up for that. Lastly, Carol gave wonderful statistics, and as she said, not all of the races have been decided. But, please don't quote me, don't put this in the newspaper, because it's very, very, very preliminary. But I couldn't wait to start to look for what we have so far. And in San Mateo County, I told you earlier that about 200 women, 200 plus women ran in the 2 counties. In San Mateo County, of the women who ran, 81% got elected. That is just phenomenal because they're running, as I said, in the main. There are some incumbents, but not many. In my own, I live in Menlo Park, and we are now voting by district, and we had one place open in our district, and we had 3 people running. 2 were incumbents, and the newbie, who's a woman, won. And we did help her a little bit with her campaign, so we were very happy about that. In any event, I would love to have, I don't want to take too much time, but I'd love to have your comments. And I promise one story. It is such fun to mentor these women. It really is. And whatever your skill is, I really recommend that you do it. One of our candidates ran for city council in San Carlos. We had 2 women running in San Carlos, and they both won. I got to know her right at the beginning, and each one has a story, and they're all so interesting. This woman has 2 children, and she has her own business. She's a busy young woman. I would guess she's probably between 35 and 40, something like that. And her boy, her 11-year-old boy, had done some volunteer work for Mrs. Clinton. I don't know what he did, but anyway, it was his first campaign. And the next day after the election, he came to breakfast and he says, "Mom, we gotta move. I wanna move." And she said, "What? What are you talking about?" He said, "I don't wanna live in the United States. I don't like this country. We gotta move somewhere else." And like, any parent, you would first of all be very surprised, and you're thinking, what would a good, smart parent say? And she said to me that what she thought was, she's always been interested in politics, but never involved. And she said, "I can't say something to him that's going to have any impact unless I get involved myself." And she decided right then that she was going to run for city council. Having no experience, no particular interest, and having an otherwise very busy life. And she not only won, but she came in first in San Carlos. So we're very proud of her. But the stories are like that. Everyone has a different reason why they're running. And it's my hope, and I sort of feel it in my bones, and I hope you do too, but I'd be interested in your comments. I sort of feel that this is the time. It isn't just this year that a lot of women are going to run, but I think in part because there's so many close elections, and in part because of the whole political climate that's going on right now, that more people are going to vote than ever before next time, and women are going to continue to run. They now see many of their friends have done it, and it doesn't seem so impossible. It doesn't seem like just a man's world. It's something that they can do, that they should do, and we'll see, but I hope my bones are right. Anyway, thank you for your attention. Yes,
Do you plan to expand to other counties or states?
Do we expect to expand to other states? I've been asked that a lot. I've just been asked whether we could do it over in Alameda or Oakland or something. And I really do think we've come upon something. I find that men and women, are very supportive of what we're doing. And what seems to interest them the most is the fact that we're nonpartisan. I mean, we just decided that from the first, but we didn't realize that in this political climate with the gridlock and the name calling and, I don't have to, that an organization that's nonpartisan and says we're not going to pay attention to that is very popular. But no, we are not out looking for, we're not franchising into other areas. There's a lot of work involved in this. Aline is, actually Rob, her husband, should I tell the story about our husbands or not? No? Later? Okay. Anyway, did you have anything you were going to say? Oh, okay, well, I don't want to take away from our good volunteer here, so Storm, it's all yours. And thank you again.
Well, thank you, and it's a real pleasure to be here. to see some familiar faces. And some of you may be saying, where have I seen that guy, or where have I heard that name before? How many of you here have gone to the Coastal Theater and seen some of those plays? Yes. So you may remember the Laramie Project, you may remember To Kill a Mockingbird, and then up in Pacifica. But I've had the pleasure of working with folks like Aline and Carol for, like I said, about 30 years. I was still at Berkeley, I got recruited, and I learned so much more than I learned in any classroom, and eventually did go on to get a master's in political science. I started the dissertation. I'm sorry to say I didn't finish it, but I started the dissertation in political science. But most of my experience has been working with groups. I did work as a deputy campaign manager, and I was the executive director of a couple of county central committees. And so when Aline mentioned that she was working with this group called WIRE that was about getting more women into elective office, I said, I would love to do that. I feel like I have a tremendous bank of skills. And part of what I've come to appreciate is that women have a different leadership style, a very important leadership style. So I'm here to say that there are those of us in the other half of the population who are very, very supportive of you folks, and doing, helping you get more women elected into office. And that comes in a lot of different ways. And I guess that's my primary message here tonight, I hope, is to encourage you. One, I think we should all step back and think about, really, we are so lucky. And some of you may have lived in other places, right? I spent 2 years in South Korea as a kid, and I used to teach government and politics. We're so lucky to have things. We don't wait in lines and worry about being blown up. And that's actually a frequent occurrence in some countries. And we take that for granted. And it's a wonderful thing that we feel we can take it for granted, but you know what? We're mistaken. Democracy is always at risk. And that's part of the fun, right? But at any rate, so I wanted to turn those skills, and what I've been able to do is I work with 4 candidates, 3 for city council, 1 for board of education. 2 of them won, I'm very happy to say, and 1 came very close, and another one has already told me she's rearing for 2020. So the way I would help them is, the WIRE would put me in touch with the candidates. They'd send me a profile, and basically I'm here to help people get elected. So unless they have, there were 1 or 2 points where I said, well, I may or may not agree with that, but that's not really, for the most part, that's not my place. So I would talk with them about the beginning of the campaign and helping them form their campaign organization and figure out what are the resources that you already have and that you already know about. Many of you have run for office, you just forgot about it, right? You went, high school this or college that, especially being here in the university, the AAUW, many of you have taken leadership roles over different times. So one candidate, a woman by the name of Ellen Comey, she's just a fantastic candidate. She has a resume, longer than my arm, and was endorsed by candidates above her, by office holders above her, and that's very rare, actually. You don't endorse the candidate below you because all you have is cost there. All you're going to do is turn some people off. But Ellen had those, and she's a graduate of Harvard's Government Institute and all those different kinds of things. So what did I do with Ellen? I talked with her about her campaign, and then I became a key advisor on her website. I said, look, people identify with human beings. They like stories. They like human connection. And so later I was pleased that she had Anna Eshu and Ro Khanna on her website. And I said, well, a lot of the voters are older. You really need larger font, right? You need, so that people don't have an unpleasant experience reading your site. You don't want to get somebody there and then tick them off. So mostly for me, it's been about conversations, but election night was a lot of fun because I drove down to the campaigns and I had a chance to, I'd met with some in person. So, for example, with Christina Umhofer, who is running for city council in Redwood City, she and her friend were outside the party, and they were giving an interview on Peninsula TV. So I held the light over them while they were giving their interview on her cell phone as the mayor of Redwood City walked by and said hi. So for me, that's just a lot of fun, working with people. And I want to encourage you to, one, consider it yourself. Two, consider people you know. You all know someone that you think is very capable of, that we could benefit from working with. And you're going to be seeing all your friends and family at Thanksgiving. And so we will provide those information and those skills to help you get started. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and we look forward to answering any questions that you have.
Thank you, John. Carol will have one more comment, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments.
As Storm was talking, it reminded me that I did not make clear, WIRE does not endorse a candidate, as I explained, but members of WIRE who, like Storm, are volunteers, you can endorse, you can give them money, you can do whatever you want. So you're not inhibited in terms of your own rights as a citizen to support someone. I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, questions, comments? Mary?
Besides time, what is the other main issue that women say prohibits them from running or considering running?
Oh, go ahead.
I probably should have talked about that too. I was trying to be short. The biggest problem is to recruit. Women, I don't know the percentage, but I'd say 99 plus whatever the ivory soap thing is, of women, when you ask them to run or consider an appointment, they say, I'm not qualified. Men don't say that. And this group in New Jersey that we've been talking about, they've done studies on this, and they show that if you ask a man to run, it takes him about 2 weeks to decide. He asks his wife, he asks his business partner, he says, I'm all in. He doesn't, I don't mean to be rude, and I'm generalizing here, Storm, but men don't seem to ask themselves, am I qualified? But women do it all the time, and it takes them on average 2 to 4 years after someone's asked them to run for something to make their decision. And to show you what we're up against, a young woman in Palo Alto 2 years ago was asked to run for school board, and she said, I'm not qualified. Now this woman grew up in New Jersey public schools. She moved to and she was a school teacher in public schools in New Jersey. The family moved to Palo Alto. She had 3 kids in public schools here in Palo Alto. And, listen to this, she had a PhD from Stanford in education. And she said, I'm not qualified. And this, you all smile and all, but this is what happens. So one of the reasons we need you is not only to identify good candidates, but help us recruit them, which means to help us talk them into running. In fact, this woman ran first and got more votes than the incumbents when she ran. But that's the biggest challenge with women. And that's why, and they'll tell you that all over the country, that's not just here, is convincing them that they're qualified and that they should run.
I've asked that question of some of the local candidates, and a couple of things they said. One of them is unique to this area, which is the high cost of living makes it almost impossible for a woman to quit her job or work part-time in order to run for office. And they may not have the flexibility that in their jobs to be able to do the things that you need to do during the campaign. The second thing was a lot of women aren't real comfortable with fundraising. And, it depends upon the race, but, usually you gotta raise at least $7,000, and in some cases it's 30 or 1,000 or more, and in the case of a county board of supervisors, it's a lot more than that. And so those are impediments, but what we have heard from candidates is that if they feel they are encircled by a group of people who will support them along the way, they're more apt to do it. And that's one of the things that's when you're identifying a woman who you think would be good in office, it's important to encircle them with people who have not only the skill sets that can help them, but also will go out and walk precincts with them, because at a local level, it's very grassroots to get elected, and most people who win have walked precincts, and if they can be out there with their best friend and others who will get out there on a Saturday or after work and walk precincts, that will make a huge difference to them in terms of whether they'll do it, whether they'll keep up doing the grassroots kinds of activities that they need. And as we've seen, even at a congressional level, some of the elections are being won or lost by just a few votes. So having that kind of support is really important.
You guys have said everything?
Okay, yes?
What are some of the skills of things that WIRE does, like maybe what's on that list up there for a candidate, or maybe even in reverse, what are things that you cannot provide, that volunteers cannot or don't provide?
So WIRE volunteers, let me just sort of list the kinds of things that when you become a member and we send you a survey about your skill sets, it ranges everything from database management, recruiting volunteers, volunteer management, website, social media. Those areas, you could be fantastic and provide a great resource and never been involved yourself in a political campaign. You don't have to be involved in political campaigns. Then there's other areas, and fundraising is another one. If you're a really good fundraiser, you can help a candidate develop a fundraising plan even though you've not been involved in politics before. The areas where the expertise is really important is developing a campaign plan. I mean, if you don't know anything about politics, it's hard to develop a campaign plan. And there's some areas, other areas of advice where having some political experience yourself, having been a candidate, having worked on campaigns, that's very important. We have one of our members who provided editing services to a candidate who won in Gilroy for city council, and she had everything. This is a dynamo person. She had everything lined up, and when I met with her, I said, well, what do you need? And she said, well, you know what? I wrote all of the website material myself. I really feel like I need someone who can take a look at it and help sort of streamline it, make sure that it's got the right punch, that it really reflects who I am. And so this volunteer we had no political experience at all, but she was an editor that was her profession. And so she was a great resource to this candidate. So there is every one of you, because I know the AAUW members, is incredibly talented. Every one of you can make a huge difference in a campaign. And that's why we need to keep getting our message out about us and bringing more people into the fold, because we had 200 women who ran. Many of them didn't know about us, but the next election cycle, they're going to know about us, and they're going to be coming to us, and we need to have a whole stable of women and men who are willing to volunteer, because we're going to need that, because the candidates will need it. Yes, and so in terms of other volunteer activities, well, one of the things we did is we put on events for candidates and campaign workshops. We also put on informational meetings, and in the beginning of next year, we're going to do two things. We're going to have a workshop for women who ran but weren't successful the first time, because they, more than anybody else, need tips on what they can do to run a more successful campaign. Some of them may decide to seek appointed office, and they need the support. So the board members, there's 8 of us, we can't do all of that work ourselves. So we need people to help organize workshops. We need people to help organize informational meetings at various levels. We are raising a little bit of money just for our operational support. We need some assistance with that. We're going to do a workshop for newly elected officials to help them get onboarded right, and we're going to have women who have been in an office at the local level be speaking with them and give them some tips. For example, one city council member said, what I would tell a new city council member is don't sign up for every committee, you'll go crazy. Pick the committees that you really care about, whether you can make a difference. And there's little bits of advice like that that if someone doesn't tell you, you can go in and get burnt out or maybe not be as effective because you're spread too thin. So we could use assistance with that. Is there anything else I missed, Carol? We are just about an hour, so if there may be one more question, but we don't want to go beyond that for your sake. Gail?
Yes, do you help people also telling them what they shouldn't do? In other words, if you
Oh, I didn't answer the question. Well, what they should not do is use WIRE's name. Like a volunteer should never say, WIRE supports you. WIRE's providing you assistance, because we need to be very careful that we are not identified as an organization as supporting, endorsing a particular candidate. And this is especially tricky when you've got, two openings on a council, and you could have 3 women. I mean, they can't all win. And so that's what's really important. But other than that, what we want is, if you're gonna volunteer, we want you, like any responsible person does, to show up, be there, and be clear with the candidate about what you can do and what you can't do in terms of your time. And that's really important, because we don't want a candidate to be expecting more than what you're able to give. And in some cases, our volunteers spend 2 hours or 1 hour conversation, and that's what they do for the candidate. Others are with the candidate in a more general way throughout the campaign. But it's very important to be very clear about what you can do so that the candidates don't have unrealistic expectations. But Gail, I didn't answer your question. What are you getting at?
I was thinking to help some people, I've observed some candidates in different types of groups. And it would be nice to have, they need some help sometimes on what not to say when they go on campaign.
Oh, you're saying what candidates shouldn't say.
Yes, can you help people with that?
Oh, absolutely. And that, I would say that goes into kind of the campaign strategy, or it could be preparing. For example, some women have said, who've attended our campaign workshops, we've said, what do you want help with? Some women said, we need help with debate preparation. And someone who's savvy will say, here's how you prepare for debate, here's things that you say, here's what you don't say, you need to know your audience, et cetera, et cetera. And so absolutely, volunteers through our group, if the candidate wants it, we don't force anything on candidates, but if they want assistance in that area, that's a fantastic place to make a huge difference with the candidate. How do you work with the media? Is another one.
One of our goals was, and we didn't know whether we could do this, but to have the candidates meet one another. Having been a candidate myself, I know how lonely it can be sometimes. You're exhausted and you feel you're all by yourself. And the only people who really understand are other people who have run or are running for office. And at these candidate workshops, we have found that they really enjoy meeting one another. They make appointments to talk and to share ideas and volunteers and whatever. And that's been very important to them. At our last campaign workshop, one of the things we did was to have, in small groups, have the candidates get up and give their elevator speech. How you introduce yourself in 20 seconds, which is very, very difficult. And they critiqued one another. And that was very effective. And I think the candidates accepted the criticism, they were positive, from other candidates even better than they did from the people who thought they were experts.
Yes. Where does WIRE get its funding? You must need some funding.
So in our this year, we had the benefit of donations from larger donations from 2 seed donors. But that was like a lot of startup funding. It was for the first year, and so now for the first time we're starting to raise money, and we're going to the people who are associated in some way, who benefited from some of our workshops, from others that we know who really care. And we need to raise just about $20,000, and that's we have a part-time consultant who helps us. She did a lot of the candidate volunteer matching. We want to continue with that, but we're like AAUW. We're real bare bones. We try to do everything on a shoestring. So hopefully we'll be successful in raising those funds, because there's a lot we want to do in 2019. Thank you for the question. So please, if you haven't signed the member list, which all it means is that no dues, it just means that you're giving us permission to put your information in the database. Please do so. And if you want to actually sign up to be a volunteer, then there's a sheet up here. You can take more brochures, anyone you know who's interested, and my card's up here.
I always ask everybody if you would just take the one brochure you have and give it to another friend. So we would, what are there, about 30 people here, we would touch at least 60 people. That would be very helpful.
How many members?
Okay, well, thank you. Our time is up. We've gone over a little bit. Excuse us for that, but thank you very much. You're a great audience.
Well, thank you. I think it was very interesting and helpful from so many different perspectives. I do agree with, I think, the basic premise of what you're trying to do is not only at the county level, but these seats are pipelines for state and federal. That's what the Center for American Women in Politics has found as well. So that this work is setting women in motion to keep going up and to keep making a difference and having a seat on the table. So thank you for what you do. And Nancy and Jan asked me on behalf of AAUW Half Moon Bay to thank you for coming tonight with this gift. And so we did learn a lot, and hopefully we will spread the word just as you asked. So another round of applause, please.